What are the NFC tight end depth charts looking like after NFL free agency, and what does that mean for fantasy football right now before the draft? It's time to break it down all right here for you right now as we give you updates on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Our Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. It's quieted a little bit on the NFL free agency front. We're in the lull here as the pro days wrap up. When we turn the corner into April, and the 2022 NFL draft will be the focus of teams improving this offseason. But we got to catch you up on what's happened here in free agency. So we're going through the positions here, offensive skill-wise, and we're going and giving you what these teams are looking like at the positions across the board. We already did our running back updates there in the early part of free agency. Now we're on to tight ends. We will close looking at wide receivers and quarterbacks and how they stack up on teams throughout the league. We're doing it conference at a time. We're splitting it up. So we're back to the NFC today. We'll break down the NFC tight end depth charts here. Some changes of note that we do have to keep track of here. So good stuff to look at there. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are free and available for you on all platforms. All right, so what we do here is we'll go NFC, alphabetical order, all 16 teams. We'll start with the Arizona Cardinals, end up with the Washington Commanders, and that's how we do it here. When we do our shows and our series in one conference there, we do divisions as well, but for tight ends and looking across the board, I think it's fair to take one conference here. So let's look at the Cardinals. They re-signed Zach Ertz. They re-signed Max Williams here. So they brought back their two tight ends from last year. Remember the injury to Williams there. He was clicking and looking good with Kyler Murray. That prompted the trade for Zach Ertz at midseason. So Williams went down for the season. Ertz took over as a pretty key target here for Murray all over the field. So the tight end has been featured a little bit more here as they've made the transition from Bruce Arians to Cliff Kingsbury. It was an afterthought with the Cardinals before. We thought it wasn't going to be a big part of what the Cardinals do here in the passing game, but you look at what their wide receiver core is down to. DeAndre Hopkins is their best option right now with Rondale Moore. So they need some help in producing kind of feel here at tight end. And you look at it with Ertz, I think he's going to have a key role, continue to have that ear of Kyler Murray and be a key target here. So Max Williams probably maxed out his value there before Ertz was picked up. So right now Ertz is ahead of him on the depth chart. The third guy is a familiar name because he's David Wells. It's not the pitcher that used to perform for the Yankees and Blue Jays. No, it's a San Diego State product. So not much behind Ertz and Williams. I'm figuring they'll have some 12 personnel here with the reduction in wide receiver depth with no Christian Kirk, no AJ Green. So that's a potential, and that could be a big reason why Kingsbury and Steve Keim, the general manager, brought back Ertz and Williams. So we're going to be on the lookout for that. We will get to in a couple shows the Cardinals wide receiver depth chart. It does not look good here behind Hopkins and Moore. So a lot of answers need to be found there as they move on from Kirk and Green here in 2022. But Ertz and Williams, we thought they could move on from one or both, but the Cardinals have them back in the fold for next season. Let's go to the Atlanta Falcons. This one is pretty thin here. It's Kyle Pitts, their first-round pick from the 2021 NFL Draft. He's locked in here as a dominant number one because Hayden Hurst, we talked about him when we broke down the depth charts in the AFC. He's now a member of the Bengals, replacing C.J. Uzomah, who signed with the Jets. So Kyle Pitts is kind of flying solo here. There are other options right now are Parker Hess, an Iowa product, notably, where George Kittle and Noah Fant went. So Parker Hess a guy that's, I guess, a mini camp body, if you'd say that. And then Daniel Helm, a receiver from Duke here. So Parker Hess and Daniel Helm are the guys behind Kyle Pitts. So I'm guessing the Falcons will be in the market for a backup tight end, either veteran or a decent drafted guy here come the last 2 days in April of the draft. So Kyle Pitts looking good here to dominate targets, as well as Ertz and Williams. He's in a situation where wide receiver is pretty thin, so he's going to be the go-to guy for Marcus Mariota, no doubt about that. So again, mobile quarterback, spread type offenses, different concepts there, but yeah, Ertz and Pitts have some really sneaky good value here going into the season based on the pecking order of the receiving cores of the teams here with mobile quarterbacks Murray and Mariota. All right, let's go to the Carolina Panthers here. They have the same type of depth charts from last year. Tommy Tremble is taken over from Ian Thomas as the top tight end. They also have Stephen Sullivan, an LSU product, and Colin Thompson, a Temple product. So Sullivan tied to the Joe Brady kind of LSU connection there, and Colin Thompson, of course. Matt Rule has a lot of Temple players, and he's another guy on the list. But Tremble from Notre Dame, Ian Thomas there, that's been a holdover. They've hinted at some bigger roles for him, but he's been more the blocking tight end. I think they could expand Tremble's role. I think he's a bit versatile as well. We saw him carry the ball in for a touchdown last year. So Tremble is a guy, great name, by the way. It should strike fear in the hearts of men here that are trying to defend him, but it hasn't quite lived up to that. But a good athlete, can move around here. So we'll see if they can expand his role. But again, the Panthers, unlike the Falcons and Cardinals, rather deep at wide receiver. So I'm not sure that you'll find much value here. Now, the Bears might have some value for you at tight end, and we've been waiting for Cole Kmet. When is it going to happen here for Cole Kmet? There's no Jimmy Graham this time, so they haven't re-signed him. So figure Jimmy Graham is fading into the sunset. Jesper Horsted is now their backup. He was in that role last year. So Cole Kmet, we want to see more out of him. Speaking of Notre Dame, you had Tremble there from the Fighting Irish, Kmet in that tight end factory as well. So Kmet has flashed a little bit. He's been kind of lost in the previous offense there with Matt Nagy. So we hope things will change here with him as a key target for Justin Fields as they go forward here in this new offense. It's more of the Packers style of offense. And we know Packers have been up and down with their usage of tight end, but we've also seen a big year from Robert Tonyan scoring touchdowns. That's the biggest thing for Kmet. We want him to see the ball in the middle of the field and get some consistent targets, but we also want to see him become a red zone threat here without Graham, and that would be big for his value. So a sleeper more into that tight end 2 mold here, while Ertz, I think, falls into a better spot here among the tight end ones on the back end. One guy we know is going to remain a tight end 1 based on the situation on his team, Dalton Schultz of the Cowboys. He was given the franchise tag and brought back. They moved on from Amari Cooper. So you look at CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. You have Dalton Schultz next. I mean, James Washington would be their third wide receiver here from the Steelers. So Schultz is in a good position. Again, what do we look for in the tight end here in fantasy football? Is he going to be among the top 3 targets? And this is what the Cowboys want to do, kind of get Schultz more involved. They like the intermediate routes there with CeeDee Lamb and Schultz working that with Dak Prescott, and then having Michael Gallup to stretch the field there. So I think there was a bit of superfluous production there in the middle of the field, short and intermediate routes with Cooper, Lamb, and Schultz. That's why they moved Cooper, and that's why they invested to keep Schultz and Gallup here in 2022. And no Cedric Wilson. They're remixing the entire receiving core there behind what we have with Lamb and Gallup, so that's good news for Schultz. The backup is Jeremy Sprinkle there, the former Washington Commanders player. He's in the mix. And then you look at Sean McKeon. He's the third tight end. So not much to see there. We'll see about what they do with Blake Jarwin, if he has a big role here or not. But it's over. I think Schultz is the main man here. And look, another good product. Schultz out of Stanford where Ertz played. So good start to our tight end depth chart look here in the NFC. 2 Stanford products as bookends, Ertz and Schultz looking really good as productive tight ends in the NFC. All right, we'll get to our final 11 teams here in our next two segments. We'll do 6 in our second segment, and we'll go back down to 5 in our final. But we'll get to all the teams. Don't worry here, as we always do. We go in depth and break it down for you on Locked On Fantasy Football. After months of playing, college basketball has determined the top teams for the Final Four and will determine this year's national champion this coming week. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information, from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews of all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't forget about those NFL futures ahead of when we'll get NFL game betting back in the flow later during the season in 2022. Head to the website today, use a mobile device to learn more about the trends in action only at betonline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, let's continue the show here and look at the tight end depth charts here in the NFC and what that means for fantasy football as we look at it and reset the table here before the 2022 NFL draft. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Make sure you're following Locked On NFL, Locked On Experts, covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday, less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Detroit is where we left off. We'll go from D, the Dallas Cowboys, to the other D, Detroit Lions here in the NFC. TJ Hawkinson is still your top tight end here and looking good. He just has to recover from that injury here, and he's going to dominate. We know that. As a key target here, it doesn't matter. He was a little bit inconsistent and disappointing in the injury last year, but Hawkinson can be special. We know it. He's a first-round pick, good pedigree out of Iowa. Again, we established Iowa is a pretty big tight end school here, and we know that between him and George Kittle and Noah Fant, you have some really good production here from that position from that school. Again, another Notre Dame product is the backup for the Lions. So we talked about we had in Tremble and Kmet. Well, Brock Wright is the backup now in Detroit to TJ Hawkinson. They also have Garrett Griffin, a kid from Air Force there. So Hawkinson really can dominate that situation, play off the wide receivers. They're a little bit deeper at wide receiver now, but Hawkinson is going to stay a big role there with Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're clear number one going into year two. The Packers, there was some question mark whether they'd bring back Robert Tonyan at tight end, but they did after the Devontae Adams trade. So Packers a little bit thin at wide receiver. We know that. When you have Al Lazard and Randall Cobb as your best options there, the tight end is going to have a bigger profile. So they bring back Tonyan here as a key guy for Aaron Rodgers on a cheaper deal that was easy to manage here after he was a restricted free agent, was brought back last year. But Tonyan in the mix. Josiah DeGuara flashed a little bit. He's there, the Cincinnati product, and a pretty good overall receiver, but more of a blocking type for what the Packers need. Mercedes Lewis still plugging along, but he's pretty much a touchdown-dependent blocking type as well at this stage of his career. From the Jaguars, he's had a nice long stint with the Packers as a valuable kind of role player for them. And you have Tyler Davis also coming over from the Jaguars here, a much younger player. We know that. So he's rounding up the depth chart. But DeGuara, we thought, might have some upside should Tonyan depart here, playing off Adams. But now Tonyan has some intrigue here because of that Adams loss and needing a big red zone fill-in void there for Aaron Rodgers here in 2022. We go from Green Bay to the Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. Tyler Higby is still on top of their depth chart, and he had some moments there as a tight end one last year without Gerald Everett to steal the action. Then Kendall Blanton, however, came through near the end of the playoffs, Super Bowl. He was very productive there for the Rams, filling in for Higby, who got banged up in that Super Bowl. So Kendall Blanton, again, a guy that we look at, could have a little expanded role here, but it's, again, tough to sustain, A, one tight end in the Rams offense, even when they have some talent there, and B, trying to work in two here. So we'll see how it plays out, but I think it's still going to be a more wide receiver production-centric team. In the passing game, it rounds out with Bryson Hopkins there and one Jacob Harris as the tight ends there for the Rams. We go to the Vikings. Irv Smith coming off a big injury there. He takes over as the number one again with their former backup, but that filled in nicely for Smith at times and had some production. Tyler Conklin, he's now a member of the Jets. So Irv Smith clear number one. We just talked about the Rams. One of their former guys, Johnny Munt, is now the backup here to Irv Smith. He's the best option. Then you have Ben Ellefson from North Dakota State. So Minnesota, North Dakota State, not too far there. And then you have Zach Davidson from Central Missouri. He's the fourth guy. I liked him in the draft as a bit of a sleeper, but this is a situation that's favoring Irv Smith here. We'll see what the Vikings do with their new offense. I think it could tilt to Irv Smith being in more of a blocking role, and they just roll with looking at Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and then figure out, is KJ Osborne going to be the third guy, or are they going to have to replace him at wide receiver with the rookies? So some things to look at there. But Kevin O'Connell, coming from the Rams, you think his style is going to be more with the three receivers and the tight end at times when the matchup dictates it, and based on the receiving skills of that player going to be using. But it figures to help the three wide receivers more than Smith here in terms of being the big producers. But Smith still has got to be the top guy here with Munt as the number two. We go to the Saints, and Adam Trotman will try this again. And sleeper that has a lot of upside here. Taysom Hill right now is a backup. They have Nick Vanette there as a third tight end, and Juwan Johnson, who flashed as a primary touchdown scorer early last season before fading as a wide receiver hybrid. He's their fourth guy on the list. So Adam Trotman, I'd really like the talent, like the skill set, like potential for being a key target here. We thought he was going to have a bigger role with the Saints, just given their wide receiver situation. But it's actually improved because Michael Thomas is in the fold looking like he's okay. Good to play with them. Marcus Callaway, Traquan Smith. So Trotman, we want to see more out of him, and the usage has to be there. He definitely has the talent to make a difference. But very interesting that Juwan Johnson now buried his fourth, and Hill has been elevated to number two as a swing player from quarterback here for the Saints. Last thing we'll talk about in this segment is the New York Giants. Ricky Seals-Jones is the Giants' top tight end as of right now. Evan Ingram went to the Jaguars as a free agent. Ricky Seals-Jones, we know he started with the Cardinals. He's bounced around. He was with the Commanders last year, filled in well for Logan Thomas when Thomas was injured. So stealing from the division, they go with Ricky Seals-Jones right now. And again, it is an opportunity here because we saw Dawson Knox emerge and do some things here in Brian Daboll's offense in Buffalo, even though it was more wide receiver centric. So we'll watch definitely Ricky Seals-Jones having an impact here in 2022 and a sleeper in fantasy that we can look at it as a tight end too with some upside. The next tight end is Ryson John. He's a Canadian player out of Simon Fraser. So that's your next best tight end. So Ricky Seals-Jones, golden opportunity here. Then you have Jake Hausman, guy that you guys might know from Ohio State. He's the third guy on the list here. So Ricky Seals-Jones, a bit of a sleeper. Again, in this situation, security blanket for Daniel Jones. You have Tyrod Taylor as your number two quarterback. So, again, the Giants, we'll see. But anytime you have some opportunity there, you're going to look at it. I think the biggest concern with the Giants is how do they keep their receivers together and healthy. Kadarius Toney, Sterling Shepard, and Kenny Golladay, are they going to produce at the level to open things up for Ricky Seals-Jones at a lower level, or do they really produce and make it work with 11 personnel where Seals-Jones is more an afterthought? We'll have to see that here with the Giants going forward. I think it'll be a little bit halfway between both of those outcomes here for RSJ and the Giants in 2022. All right, we still have 5 more teams to break down from the NFC and their tight end depth charts here on the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football. And we do have to give you another reminder about this episode being brought to you by Rock Auto. With ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now possible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on his or her computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why do you spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store car dealership? Just take a Honda Odyssey fuel pump. You could pay $216 at Rock Auto or $353 from a chain store. I know what I'm picking, Rock Auto. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. We'll explain their easy-to-use website to find out the solution to your auto parts needs. They will have the hard-to-find part there for you at a great price. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on into there. How did you hear about us box and know we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Find them at rockauto.com. All right, let us close the show looking at the last 5 teams. We'll go Eagles, 49ers, Seahawks, Buccaneers, Commanders, and their tight end situations going into 2022. The Eagles, Dallas Goedert is the clear number 1 here for Jalen Hurts. Interesting developments behind them. Jack Stoll is the number 2 tight end. And you have Tyree Jackson. He was a quarterback at Buffalo. They converted him to tight end. He's kind of like a Logan Thomas type here. So we'll see if it pans out for him. But they're excited that Jackson could do some damage here. But for right now, Jack Stoll in between him and Goddard on the depth chart. And they also have Richard Rodgers, not to be confused with the music legend here with Oscar Hammerstein, but this is the tight end that was with the Packers. You might remember him for that winning touchdown there with Aaron Rodgers playing a tight end. So Richard Rodgers still plugging away in the league here as an older player, but Dallas Goedert in really good shape to build on his tight end 1 status here in 2022 as he gets another year in with Hurts. At San Francisco, you still have a lot of familiar names here. George Kittle on atop the list, coming off a big year and trying to stay healthier here in 2022. You have Charlie Warner. He's a bit of a swing tight end. He's the number 2. But Ross Dwelley, the receiving tight end, he was brought back here, re-signed just recently here. So not much of changes here with Kittle, Warner, and Dwelley. The 4th tight end is Tanner Hudson in San Francisco. So they've got some good depth. When we know when Kittle's been hurting, it's been hard to find any production here from the 49ers tight ends, but Dwelley did fill in, at least on the red zone aspect of things here, a couple of seasons ago, and he's back in the fold here with Kittle and Warner. All right, let's go to Seattle, and we know they made that big deal with the Broncos involving Russell Wilson. Well, they got back Noah Fant, a pretty good starting tight end, first-round pick here, can do some damage in this offense, maybe change it up a little bit and complement to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett here. So he's going to share the stage here with Will Dissly. He was re-signed on a pretty nice contract as well. So Fant and Dissly are the 1-2 punch. Maybe a few more instances of 12 personnel. I don't know if Wilson was into that too much with the Seahawks offense. I think it'll be versatile here for sure. We've seen some of that here with Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator, again, like Kevin O'Connell, ties to the Rams here. So you'll see some 12 personnel mixed in pretty well with that 11 personnel and 3 wide receivers. The 3rd tight end, another Stanford product, Colby Parkinson. So he's hanging around here, but again, we're going to temper expectations with Dissly in the mix still to take some numbers away from Fant, but Fant has a big opportunity here in this offense with a new quarterback. All right, let's go to the Buccaneers. We're still waiting on Rob Gronkowski. What's going to happen here? He's kind of been on the fence about returning. He knows he wants to return to the NFL. A, is it going to be with the Buccaneers? B, is it going to be with another team? Or is he going to get enough interest there to get the deal he wants? So Rob Gronkowski sitting in limbo right now. So when we look at the Buccaneers depth chart, it's still Cameron Brate on top of it. Remember, O.J. Howard is now in Buffalo, signed behind Dawson Knox. You don't have much behind Brate at this very moment. So Brate has some good value if there's no Gronk. And Gronk has excellent value if he returns here. Because their next tight end is Cody Mcelroy. They're out of Oklahoma State. So looking at Cameron Brate, he's in a good position to be a nice sleeper tight end once again in fantasy football working with Tom Brady. And finally, we look at the Washington Commanders. Logan Thomas coming back healthy. He's fine here. John Bates is their number 2 at tight end. And then you have Sammis Reyes. He's a guy that they've plucked out of Loyola, looking for some upside in the receiving core for the Commanders. So not much changing there. We'll see about Logan Thomas, if he can stay in the big 3 with Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson on this team. The injuries derailed him a little bit last year. We thought he would also have a chance to play with Ryan Fitzpatrick. That did not materialize. So we know that Carson Wentz trusts the tight end. So Logan Thomas, there's something we're going to look at here for this team. And again, Commanders could use the tight end a little bit better here, and we'll see if they can do that here with Scott Turner, the offensive coordinator. Thanks once again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Again, just like we did here, we'll go back to the AFC and go in alphabetical order from Baltimore to Tennessee there, and we'll look at the wide receiver depth charts tomorrow, starting doing that, barring a breaking news big trade here that we have to react to that we did a lot of last week. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bringing the NFL Draft to life every day with inside analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great day, and we'll break down next for you the AFC wide receiver depth charts.